Hey, Kate. Well, another very Bernie Sanders day on the campaign trail here in New Hampshire. He stopped by this polling place about an hour or so. He stopped by this polling place about an hour or so ago, and I have to tell you, it was one of the more bizarre campaign events I have ever covered as a political reporter. He essentially came here, walked down through a line of supporters, got to the end of the line of supporters who were waiting with him. He didn't really stop to shake many hands or talk to voters, and then he decided to go for a walk. So the press corps following him and Bernie Sanders and a handful of his supporters walked around the block here through some traffic at many points, causing no small degree of stress for the Secret Service agents who were trying to protect him at this point, both from sharp objects, flying people, potentially cars driving down the street. He joked around that he normally likes to take very quiet walks. It is something he does typically on Election Day with his wife or ahead of big events. But this one, of course, was not so quiet. He did not take very many questions from reporters, but I did get one into him right when he arrived. Take a look. Are you still the underdog?
Well, what I think is if there is a large voter turnout, if a lot of folks come out to vote, we're going to do just fine. And it looks like there is going to be a large voter turnout. That's what democracy is about, and that's what we're looking forward to today.
Sanders acting a little bit more like the front runner, not taking very many questions from the press. Now they are pretty confident at this point that they have a solid lead, and they don't want to make any mistakes that might jeopardize it. Kate?
Well, Casey, I was going to ask you about that because you've written about sort of the change in tenor that you feel as you're covering the Bernie Sanders campaign. It has changed in the last few days.
It has. Some of that is to do strictly with the addition of the Secret Service, of course, coming on Tuesday. But the overall feel is of a campaign that was once scrappy underdog. The senator would travel in one rental car often. He likes to make very last-minute decisions. He'll point at a diner out the window or decide he wants to have tea. You know, senators, most of them are pretty anonymous. They can go about their daily life in a pretty normal way. And Sanders seems to still want to do that. But it's now getting harder and harder. And because he is suddenly a more significant threat to Secretary Clinton than many people expected, he is in some ways, both him and his campaign are having to take on this more front-runner posture. So instead of being accessible like he has been, they're a little bit more closed down. The security is very intense. The Secret Service is grappling with how to deal with a candidate who does make these last-minute decisions about where to go, so they're not able to, map out their security plans in advance. And we were traveling yesterday in a 9+ car motorcade at times with 2 press buses, in many ways feeling more like the general election than an underdog in a primary, Kate.
All right, Casey Hunt following the Sanders campaign. Casey, thanks so much. With Bernie Sanders leading New Hampshire polling over the weekend, Bill Clinton made some sharp statements about the Vermont senator, particularly on his policy proposals. Yesterday, I caught up with the former president following a rally in Hudson, New Hampshire.
Does it bother you that she's not resonating with young people?
No. It was all part of the strategy the Republicans had. Keep her tied up for a year, and they're mad. A lot of them are because they think their lives are not going to be better than their parents. They feel trapped. And our opponent has a real catchy, answer for them.
Joining me now, Andrea Mitchell, host of MSNBC's Andrea Mitchell Reports. Andrea, great to see you. Thanks for joining us again here. You've done that. We've all done that rope line thing with Bill Clinton. I don't know if you could hear all of it clearly, but when I ask about young voters, he said they feel trapped. And then he said they feel trapped, and her opponent came up with a real catchy answer for that, referring to Bernie Sanders. It almost feels a little dismissive of Bernie Sanders.
And what he's been saying is that Bernie Sanders' sound bites are inaccurate, that Bernie Sanders is promising things that he can't deliver. He's been very tough and sharp in the attack mode. I think people within the Clinton campaign realize that Bill Clinton has been frustrated with the messaging, frustrated that Bernie Sanders had this momentum.
Right.
There is a sense, if you look at his face when he's watching Hillary Clinton give her speech, there's a sense of, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening to us again. The way he reacted, and it had a lot of blowback to Barack Obama, as we saw in the South Carolina primary back in 2008, when he was so dismissive of Barack Obama that a number of prominent African African-American leaders inferred that that was racially tinged, and it really hurt her. It was, in fact, a fatal blow to her candidacy against Obama.
There's a line from last night from that rally that I was at that's getting some attention. It's Bill Clinton as he was introducing his wife. Take a listen.
Look, tonight my job is to introduce Hillary. Sometimes when I'm on a stage like this, I wish we weren't married, then I could say what I really think. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I'm happy.
So he's saying he doesn't mean it in a negative way, but what he was trying to say is what he had said earlier in 2 other events, saying, you know, I'm constrained because I wish I were just a former president out here campaigning, but because I'm the spouse and we can't get too negative is basically the subtext. You know, I have to be careful what I say.
Yeah, you can sort of see the wheels spinning.
But it was late at night, and so what he says is, you know, sometimes I wish I weren't married to her. And then he said, but not in a negative way.
Right, because it's going to be taken out of context. Let's talk about the campaign a little bit more. And you asked Jane Sanders about this and about Bill Clinton's attack that we all saw in the flannel shirt on Sunday when he really went after Bernie Sanders. Let's play that bit with Jane Sanders with you earlier.
I'm surprised, a little disappointed. I think that we won't be doing that. To call this a negative campaign is, as any observer would allow, is just not accurate. We've been running a very, very positive campaign. So it's disappointing, and yet at the same time, it's politics 101.
That's Jane Sanders talking to you a couple of hours ago. Won't they have to go even more negative, the Clinton campaign, though, if they lose here tonight?
Yeah, and they would say that they have said that the Sanders campaign has been negative, but just more indirect about it. They say Sanders is implying in their press releases that he has been endorsed by unions and newspapers that have not endorsed him. They cherry pick quotes that sound positive out of otherwise endorsements of Hillary Clinton. So they are, you know, they're going back and forth. This is a campaign of press release and counter press release, and it's getting increasingly hostile because if the results do turn out to be Bernie Sanders by a big victory tonight, she really has to come back in South Carolina, and that's where we're going to see them engage. Also Nevada, and already I'm told from Minnesota, which is a caucus state, Minnesota, Colorado, Nevada, he has strength in caucus states. It's a way of organizing. It's much more difficult than the primaries, and he's trying to do what Barack Obama did.
It feels like Barack Obama all over again in that sense.
Collect delegates that way. And so you're going to see, I think, the next primary state being South Carolina. That's going to be a real battleground.
All right, Andrea Mitchell, great to check in with you. Thank
too.
you so much. And of course, you can always see Andrea Mitchell Reports weekdays, noon Eastern, right here on MSNBC. Our primetime coverage of the New Hampshire primary begins, by the way, at 6 Eastern with MSNBC's Brian Williams, Rachel Maddow, and Chris Matthews.